Welcome back to Grok Talk. I am Steve McDonald here with Mike Rogers and our guest host, Aaron Day, and our other guest host, who was really just a guest but became a guest host because he got here before everybody else, Dan Hines. So, welcome back to the show. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to go to cnht.com, our erstwhile sponsors who allow us this space to occupy here in the room to do our program. cnht.org. Thank you very much for correcting me. But enough about that and me giving you the wrong web address. Our next guest holds a PhD in Near Eastern Languages and Literatures from New York University and has served as a visiting or adjunct professor at Southern Evangelical Seminary, Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary, Charlotte, Trinity Evangelical Divinity School, Fuller Theological Seminary, Denver Theological Seminary, the King Seminary, and Regent University School of Divinity. He is a national and international speaker on themes of spiritual renewal and cultural reformation, and he has debated Jewish rabbis, agnostic professors, and gay activists on radio, TV, and college campuses, and is the host of the nationally syndicated Line of Fire radio program. Please welcome to the program Dr. Michael Brown. Good morning, sir.
Hey, great to be with you.
Great. Thanks so much for coming on the show. So, the topic of the week and the month seems to be transgender bathrooms for some crazy reason, but let me start with the first sentence of your article here. There are times in history when obedience to God means disobedience to man. This is one of those times. Would you please explain?
Yeah, when President Obama, his administration, basically gave an edict that all schools across the nation would have rules now that any 14-year-old boy who identifies as a girl can shower and change in the locker room next to 14-year-old girls, or that little kindergarten boy, Johnny, who believes he's Jane, shares the bathroom with the other kindergarten girls. And if you don't comply, then you lose your federal funding, billions of dollars. That's a point in time when people have to say, you've crossed the line. This is social insanity. We care about everybody who's struggling. We have a heart for kids who are confused, but we're not going to turn the world upside down on their behalf. And it's one of those times where we have to respectfully say no to the government, whether you're an educator, whether you're a governor, like governor of North Carolina where I live, or whether you're a parent, an individual. Enough is enough.
You know, Obama's at the end of his term. He's pretty much a lame duck. And I'm thinking back to the progressive era, beginning of last century, you know, where you had fascism under Mussolini, you had Stalinism, you had this entire progressive movement, you had the Wilson War socialism, and there were people who weren't satisfied with how fast things were progressing. And, you know, they wanted action, they wanted immediate action. Now, we've watched my entire life, I've watched the incrementalism of progressivism as it has advanced us in this direction. And this appears to me to be one of those things where, you know, the Obama administration pulled this out of a drawer and said, we're not waiting anymore. We're just going to start throwing stuff out, and this is one of those things. Does it feel like that to you? Do you think they're just going to go all out between now and the end of Obama's term? And do you have any thoughts about what else we might expect?
Well, you know, the progressive LGBT activism has really turned things upside down. The word tolerance means intolerant of every other opposing view. When they say we're inclusive, we mean we're exclusive. Except for those who agree with us. When they say we practice diversity, it means my way or the highway. And there are penalties. If you don't agree, there are penalties now. For example, some states want to push that if you don't use preferred pronouns, if I don't want to identify as male or female, I want to be called Z or Zer. If you don't use those pronouns, that I could be fined. You could be fined several $100,000. I mean, the authoritarianism behind it is mind-boggling. The courts have pushed back some of the Obamacare issues, say with abortion and things like that. The courts have pushed back against President Obama, but why not go all out? I mean, they've completely rewritten the law here. He and Loretta Lynch, they've completely rewritten the law. What's he got to lose? And he really believes in these things. He believes in these activist causes, believes it's somehow for the good. And as a lame duck president right now, who knows what's coming next? That's the best way to look at it, but be prepared for anything.
Has he overstepped his bounds, do you think? Do you think people are going to be adequately outraged at this to react?
Yes. It's a strange thing. You know, when Bruce Jenner is crowned Woman of the Year by Glamour magazine, there was not a national outcry like, come on, who are you kidding? when the ESPY Awards gave him the award for the most courageous athlete of the year. Still, there are people who were not shouting that the emperor has no clothes, maybe because it just seemed too absurd, or maybe because you have compassion on someone who's struggling. But when it starts touching the kids, when it starts touching, women and children, for example, last year Target said that they were going to go gender neutral. They didn't want to be sexist, stereotypes. So in the toy section, they no longer have boys' toys and girls' toys, and they were going to try to do that throughout the rest of the store, wherever they could remove sexist, gender stereotyping. Well, when they went one step further this year and said all of our fitting rooms and all of our bathrooms are now gender neutral, so any man who identifies as a woman is free to use the fitting rooms and the bathrooms, there's an outcry. Over 1.2 million people signed a petition saying they won't shop there anymore. Their stock losses may have been 5 or 10 billion, according to some estimates. There are lines that get crossed when people do say enough is enough. At least 12 states have said so far, sorry, we are not going to comply with this. So it does seem that a line has been crossed. And look, we're talking about sanity and morality. We're talking about common sense safety. We're talking about expectation of privacy. When the Charlotte Observer has an editorial that girls are just going to have to get used to the presence of male genitalia in their bathrooms and locker rooms, of course you've crossed the line where people are going to say, that's crazy, and that's not going to happen.
Do you think that anybody on the left is going to react the same way? I know that there was a university, I'm not sure if it was in Canada, where they had changed, maybe it was, that they had gone to basically a genderless bathroom, and within a week they had to arrest 2 people for taking video of women in the showers.
Yeah, University of Toronto, they realized that the gender-neutral shower stalls were not working that well because a couple of guys were holding cell phones over the top to photograph the gals. Look, in the city of Charlotte, when they tried to push this radical bill through last year, and it was a very liberal city council, let's say it was about 8-3 that was going to be going against the moral sanity viewpoint. Because of the bathroom part, a couple of them switched their votes. And these are liberals. They said, as I think about this, I'm not comfortable as I think about my wife and my daughter. Some of the men said that. So, yeah, there are people, Time Magazine wrote about it, that are not conservative, that are not happy with this. And it has got nothing to do with being conservative or liberal. It has to do with common sense. It has to do with safety. I mean, if you're liberal, are you okay with your 15-year-old daughter showering next to a 15-year-old boy, let alone the boy playing on the girls' sports teams and all the inequity that comes out of that? Are you comfortable with this being enforced with fines and penalties behind it? Many liberals are not comfortable either.
That brings up a couple of very good points. Texas in particular has said basically, we're not going to comply and you can shove your dollars too. And frankly, when you look at all of the costs that states incur to comply with the edicts for the dollars that they do get, in many cases, they would be better off doing less and not taking the money. But that's not the only thing. Sorry, lost the thread on the. Well, the liberals.
The correct phrase is you've derailed your train of thought. Okay.
Yeah.
So, crash.
Yeah. So pick up that last piece again about the
loss of money. Well, listen.
Yeah.
North Carolina has been threatened with the loss of $4.5 billion, and that would be very serious. From somehow you're losing your train of thought has caused me to lose my voice.
Okay, just take a second.
Slow right down. I bet Steve or
and,
Aaron's got more questions.
You got to read this article over at thestream.org, Call for National Civil Disobedience. And he's got a lot of great points in here. Kids who identify as transgender represent the tiniest minority of the population, perhaps 2 or 3 out of 1,000. Great majority of kids who identify as transgender do not do so once they pass through puberty, which is relevant to an article that he also references by the American College of Pediatricians. Some parents of transgender identified kids, along with LGBT activists, have rejected compassionate solutions for these kids. Instead, they insist that child struggles be imposed on the rest of students. Parents of transgender identified kids, along with LGBT activists, have also sought to introduce radical transgender curricula to students as young as 5. How you doing?
Yeah, everything's good here.
Okay,
and
good.
if you break those points down, you realize how much more absurd this is. That you're talking, say, 2 kids out of 1,000 in a school, and now you're going to impose their struggles on the entire school. It would be like you've got a blind kid in the school, and because he's blind, you now require all students to close their eyes and use Braille. It makes no sense even from a practical viewpoint. And then when it can change, what about kids or adults who say they're gender fluid? So you're a boy today, you're a girl tomorrow, you're both on the 3rd day, you're neither on the 4th day. I mean, how in the world are you going to now accommodate that? And why are we accommodating that or celebrating it rather than saying, okay, you've got a problem, let's try to get to the root of your problem rather than turn the world upside down because of it. It would be as if I'm convinced that the whole school is freezing cold, that we're all going to die of exposure to the cold. So all students in the hot spring have to come in wearing earmuffs and parkas and things like that. No, you don't do that. You work with the kid that has a problem. You don't turn reality upside down on their behalf.
Right, and also, didn't the College of Pediatricians actually say that it's child abuse to effectively pander to the child's
the drugs, the blockers,
the child's momentary
hormone
confusion,
blockers.
And then to aid them with hormones or other drugs?
Yeah, and the American College of Pediatricians is an interesting history there. They are a small group now because they broke away from the larger National Association of Pediatricians because they saw this radical liberal agenda. They saw that science was being ignored in many cases. They saw that an ideology was being embraced that was actually harmful to children rather than helpful to children. And like other doctors and psychologists, and in this case pediatricians, they said, look, to put a 9-year-old kid on hormone blockers to stop the onset of puberty because the kid is struggling with gender identity, and then to, say, at the age of 18, have them go through sex change surgery, that's for life. That's for good. And then for the rest of their lives be on hormones, and then they'll never totally be the opposite of their biological sex. They said that's child abuse. And to comply with that, to cater to that, rather than to work to overcome that, is the absolute wrong thing to do to a child.
There's a lot of, well, let's just say, in the Christian community, since you spend most of your time involved with them, there's a lot of liberal leanings. There's a lot of Christian socialism that goes on, and this seems to be like a moral issue that you would think that the Christian community would get behind. What is your sense? Do you think that they're going to be an adequate force in opposing this?
I'm hoping so, cautiously. The reason being that for over 11 years now, I've sounded the alarm about this issue. It was something I never focused on, something I never talked about, something that was just not on my radar. I mean, hardly would ever mention issues of LGBT activism. And beginning 2004, I started to realize that this was going to become, or really had become, the principal threat to freedom of religion, speech, and conscience in America, and that we needed to reach out to the people with compassion while resisting the agenda with courage. But as I'd address this, as I'd write about it, many people would just thought it's too controversial, or why even focus on this? Why talk about it? Last year, the light went on for many when the Supreme Court redefined marriage. All these people are, calling in a panic. Mike, what do we do? Well, we've been talking about this for years and addressing this for years. Why are you, just waking up to reality now? But still, there is that line that gets crossed. There is that point where people say, okay, enough is enough. And this really seems to have caught attention on such from so many people. And let's remember, you could really challenge the legality, not just the government overreach, but the legality of the interpretations, to say that when Title VII and Title IX say you can't discriminate based on sex, this now means gender identity. And by the way, when you asked earlier about the Obama administration, how far it would go, it's actually going this far now with medical providers, and saying that if someone requires sex change surgery, that you must comply with them. You must give them what they're requesting, and insurance covering these things and so on. So this edict is so widespread and it's not going away, and it could be applied to so many other areas of life with the government overreach. I'm really hopeful that Christians will say enough is enough, that they'll tell their elected officials, stand strong, that they'll tell their schools, listen, if you comply with this, we're going to have to pull our kids out. If we're able to, we're going to pull our kids out because we won't accept this. And I'm hearing from people that are doing that very thing. Look, the church in America is very prosperous, and we've got great programs, and we're on radio and TV and best-selling books and all that, but it's often been said American Christianity is 3,000 miles wide and 1 foot deep, and that's the problem. We haven't been very deep. We haven't been very committed. We haven't been very serious about our faith, and we need to have a general wake-up call. This area is not our big threat. The big threat is that the church is asleep in the midst of a moral crisis in America. The church has pornography problems. The church has leadership problems and scandals and all these other kinds of things. If we can get our own act together in our own households and family, I think we could really help the rest of the nation.
Yeah, so one real quick point, the piece that eluded me, is the Title IX stuff. You know, they have imposed upon schools a regime that girls must have separate sports teams to be able to compete on a fair footing, separate from the boys. And now what they are effectively doing is they're reversing all of that and calling it Title IX, too, by saying, well, the boys can think of themselves as girls and join the girls' teams and be the strongest girl on the team. No, that's exactly what Title IX was designed to prevent.
Exactly. And you think of girls that are serious athletes, girls that are looking for scholarships, girls that want to be at the top of their classes and things like that. Are colleges now going to be offering scholarship to teenage boys who identify as girls? Shall we hail Bruce Jenner as the greatest female athlete of all time? I mean, the absurdity of all these things. In the Olympics now, you don't even have to have sex change surgery to compete as transgender if you identify in that way. I think just hormone treatment. So, yeah, it opens up another Pandora's box of injustice, inequity against girls that Title IX was designed to protect. And then on top of that, it completely trashes on a societal level all the girls and women who've been sexually abused or harassed or raped over the course of their lifetimes, and they're traumatized just being in any of these private places. Now a man can come strolling in and, quote, have every right to be there. So on every level, it trashes sensibilities, and it's going to be challenged in the courts. And unless all the judges have lost their mind, and many it seems have, but unless all of them have lost their mind, this too should be resisted.
All right, we have come to the end of our segment. How do people reach you if they'd like to?
Yes, Ask Dr. Brown, askdrbrown.org. AskDrBrown.org. We just completely revamped the website. We've got thousands of hours of free resources, articles on all cutting-edge issues, my daily radio show. So AskDrBrown.org.
All right, thank you, sir. Have a great weekend.
Sure thing.
All righty, we'll see you. That's it for us. We're out of here. We'll see you next week.
From the CNHT studios in Concord, New Hampshire, just a few blocks from the New Hampshire State House, this is
Raw Talk.